Right then, so just a quick introduction from myself to the Transform in the Trent Valley scheme then. So we are a 5-year scheme. We're funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And we cover the area that you can see in purple here on the map, which is focused on the River Trent, its tributaries and its floodplains. So you can see that our scheme area is long and thin, and that's because it is looking at the river specifically. So we cover Staffordshire and Derbyshire, so East and West Midlands. And we're led by Staffordshire Wildlife Trust. So we're a partnership project with 18 different charities, local authorities, businesses, all making up the partnership. And Staffordshire Wildlife Trust are the lead partner. I'm employed by Support Staffordshire as one of the delivery partners. Within the scheme, it's made up of around 16 different projects, which comes together to make up the whole Transform in the Trent Valley scheme. And these projects cover a huge range of topics and issues in the landscape. So, for example, we have projects which look at the community, encouraging people to volunteer, learn practical conservation skills. We have activities for children, for schools, for youth groups to engage with the river and the landscape. We then have cultural heritage projects looking at the history of the area. We have access projects, so improving canal towpaths, putting in circular walks. We have a long distance footpath being put in, which is the Trent Valley Way. And that's also things like interpretation boards and the website as well, to allow people to gain information and awareness of the landscape. And then we also have some of the larger scale habitat restoration and landscape projects, including river restoration, river channel restoration, removing weirs to include fish, to improve fish passages, and lots of floodplain and wet meadow restoration as well. So that's just a quick snapshot of some of the projects and some of the things that we'll be doing over the next few years. We have a few more of these Trent talks before we finish for the summer. So as I mentioned before, West Midlands Ringing Group gave us our first Trent talk back in November. And so today I've been reflecting a little bit on this journey that we've had for these talks over the last few months. So we started them really as a way to bring, to connect people to nature throughout that winter lockdown, throughout those tier systems, to help bring nature into people's homes during the long, dark winter evenings when people maybe couldn't get out so much in their local areas. And I think on reflection, we've been very successful in doing this. At our peak, we had over 200 people joining some of the talks, or one of the talks. We've had audiences from across the world, and we've had a huge range of speakers and topics. So from birds to beavers, to composting, to dog walking, to art in public spaces. And we've only really been so successful because people like you have signed up to all of the talks, you've come along, you've engaged with us, and you've wanted more. But we will be pausing these talks over the summer because we feel that now that the evenings are getting lighter and warmer in theory, we feel that most people will be wanting to probably spend their time actually outside rather than continuing to look at a screen and to join on Zoom. So we'll be pausing the talks for the summer. We may be picking them back up next winter, but we're going to see what the situation is at the time. So if you do want to join any more, then you've got 3 more opportunities. You just book through Eventbrite in the same way. And if you do want to catch up on any of the previous talks, we record most of them and you can catch them on our YouTube channel. So that's my quick introduction. So thank you for listening to that. And what I'm going to do now is hand over to Paul to give the rest of this evening's presentation. So thank you very much, Paul.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay, good evening all. Many thank you for taking time to stop by and to listen to this talk. And also a thank you to Nicola for facilitating this through the Trent Talk scheme. We hope that this presentation is useful and gives you some ideas as to the work that we do with farmers across the region. And if there are any farmers or people, landowners on line, it gives you some ideas of some of the schemes that that we work with and how they can benefit farmland birds. So hopefully it will be of use to you. For those of you who don't know a great deal about farmland birds, we'll cover some of that detail, and there's lots of photographs on there of birds that we encounter throughout the region. So if we'll make a start. Sorry, I'm just have to stop sharing. Just had a technical issue, sorry.
No problem, it happens.
Can you see that now as the full presentation? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So to give you an introduction about us, we are West Midlands Ringing Group. We're a group of ringers that came together in 2019 as a group to participate in bird ringing as part of the British Trust for Ornithology across the West Midlands region. So we're actively ringing within Staffordshire, Shropshire, the West Midlands and Worcestershire. We're all volunteers, so ringing is something that we do in our spare time, and ringing is self-funded by ourselves, although we do get financial support and grants from across the region. We conduct various types of ringing, and we can look at, and we're going to talk about some of the ringing that we undertake, but at the moment our focus really concentrates on British farmland birds. We do a lot of work with thermal technology, and some of this will come up later, but we like to promote and champion the work of the positive farmers that we see in our region. And I'll come on to talk to why we want to do that. So to give you some kind of idea about what I'm going to talk about, I'll briefly talk to you about bird ringing in the UK. Then it's really important that we talk about the decline in farmland birds, but more so to talk about the seeds of change that we're seeing across the UK from British farmers who are trying now to sort of turn the tide and to becoming more passionate about farmland birds. We're going to talk about why farmland bird ringing is beneficial to farmers and landowners, and to show just the results that we can get back. And then we're going to just, at the end of it, we'll just give you an indication of some of the work that we do and some of the results that we've had. So bird ringing in the UK is licensed by the British Trust for Ornithology. We're all trained and qualified to ring birds. So it's a skill, it undertakes a lot of training. There's a lot of restrictions as to what we can do, because in essence it is quite invasive, although there are no real problems with bird ringing. But whilst we've got the opportunity to catch birds, it's important that we gather as much data about them, because they can inform environmental policies in the future. So ringing generates information on the survival, productivity and movement of birds, and it helps to understand why populations are changing. And the data that we gather makes a major contribution to the study of population changes and to understanding why some birds are in decline. As we move forward and the government look at implementing the Environmental Land Management Scheme, the data that we obtain should provide good baseline data for farmers so they can get rewarded for environmental work that they do. Now, I'm going to put a chart up onto the screen which is going to talk about wild bird populations in the UK, and that will show a significant decline between 1970 and 2009. And sadly, farmland birds have declined more severely than any other birds in any other habitat in the UK. There is a farmland bird index which identifies key farmland bird species, And over the last 40 or 50 years now, that has declined by 50%. And there's a number of reasons why that's happened. As time has gone on, farmland machinery is far more efficient. For people of a certain age, they might remember haystacks and hay being left in fields and wheat stooks. There's no longer that. Farm machinery is far more productive. Crops are gathered very quickly and put into secure storage, so food can be limited. There's a lot of overwintered stubbles across the UK, which has meant a poorer survival rate for species such as yellowhammers. Pesticide use has increased and has had impact on bird species such as the grey partridge. And throughout the Trent Valley and throughout the region, really, the drainage of wet grasslands and the loss of mixed farming systems has led to the decline of species such as lapwing. But at the same time, farmland refers to 75% of the UK land that is devoted to agriculture. So that is, in essence, our natural nature reserve. This is 75% of the countryside is farmland, and it's vitally important that birds within these areas are protected. As well as being productive for crops and for producing the food that we eat, it also provides semi-natural habitats such as hedgerows, field margins that are vital in providing bird species shelter and food throughout the year. When you look at that chart, you will notice that the majority of the decline took place between the 1970s and 1980s. And that is where we see the most negative impact in changes in farmland. But it's not all grim. In the last few years, the decrease is slowing down significantly. And at the moment, it appears that that is tailing off, and in some sectors, it will be seen to increase. We need to recognise that farms need to be productive, but also farmers need to recognise that their land is so important for birds. And we are starting to see seeds of change throughout our region. So when we look at what the farmland bird species are, these are critical species that are used to monitor the health of farmland. So where I've put them into a slide as being in red, these are red listed species. So these are birds of conservation concern. And you can see from that figure, there are some quite grave and negative impacts. Birds such as the tree sparrow have declined 94% in the last 50 years, which is a significant decline, whereas other birds are doing particularly better. So things like wood pigeon and jackdaws are increasing and are over 100% increase in that 50-year period. But some of the farmland birds that are key that we see are in a real decrease. So linnets, skylarks, yellowhammer are all of those species that we notice in the UK or have been seeing a big decline. So what do these statistics tell us? It's not the greatest picture for farmland birds, but what has happened is that it has had a negative impact on farmers. We work with some particularly progressive and enthusiastic farmers, and the negative impact from some environmental corners has caused them some real stress when they are doing as much as they can to balance a productive farm for food production, but also making sure they do all they can for wildlife. There's a lot of generalizations out there that farmers aren't concerned about wildlife and that they're only about productivity. And within the 7 or 8 farm groups that we work across, that can't be further from the truth. These are people who are passionate about making a change and are really keen to share their findings and their land, and to show what you can do to have a farm that's productive but also farmland friendly. So that is one of the key reasons why we like to do this work. Our findings are that not all farmers are bad. There are some brilliant ones out there. We know there are farmers who need to do more, But in essence, by working in partnership with these people, we can get our message across and deliver that educational message that improving their habit, their land for wildlife benefits everybody. So what else have we seen in relation to the seeds of change? The farmers that we work with strive to make a difference across their land. They are farm nature friendly, and you will see in the slides that come up, they do a lot of work to improve their land. The kind of things that they do, they will provide winter feed during the hungry gap between January and March, where birds struggle to find food. They will put margins and headlands in that offer insects for feeding youngsters and to help with pollination, with pollen and nectar margins. We're starting to see an improved focus within social media of farmers promoting the work that they do with wildlife. And that message does get out to other farmers who are really, really keen to get involved. As a group, we are inundated with requests from farmers from across the region to come out to their land to see what they've got and what we can do with. There's an increased amount of work of farmers and landowners working with ringing groups, and that partnership allows us to gain some really, really interesting data and, like I say, to educate farmers into what is beneficial for the future. Stewardship schemes that we see across the UK are making a huge difference. We will talk about some of these, and in particular, there are two that we think are having a real significant impact, and they are winter birdseed covers, so wild birdseed margins, and there'll be some pictures coming up, and the winter supplementary winter feed, which is where farmers are feeding specific areas for their farmland birds. There is another area that we also think is an impact, and when we're talking about tillage. So when I talk about this, I talk about how farmers plough their fields. Now, there are lots and lots of issues in relation to ploughing. It can have an impact on soil quality, erosion, and it can lead to siltation and blocking up rivers. However, farmers are moving away from that kind of old-fashioned ploughing. So would they start to look at different tillage strategies that means that their soil is less disturbed, it becomes healthier, it gets lots of food within it that supports birds. So where we go on fields that are zero till, that has no ploughing whatsoever, there are a lot more worms and insects within the soil, and that provides an excellent food source for a wide range of species. And we'll come to some of those later on. Again, where they've done very, very little to their soil, we see an increase. In the winter, if we go out to a field that's been recently ploughed, we won't find a bird in there. So they don't find it suitable for roosting habitat. They need some cover, and bare earth doesn't do that. Then farmers are starting to look at pesticides. Pesticides are still used in the UK. However, the use of pesticides is reducing dramatically. And what we're finding is that the elective use of pesticides at some times of the year, or the reduction, is also having an impact and leading to an increase in bird numbers. So what the work we do with farmers across the region, farmers are really, really enthusiastic, but there is a huge desire for them to do more. And this is something that we are really critical to be part of. So farms across the region are really leaving corners of their farms for wildlife, which is having a massive impact on the work that they do. So the work that we are looking at the moment covers quite a few farms in the region, and our main work has been across farms in Pattingham in Staffordshire, where we've now got 7 years of continual ringing data. We've helped farms in Penkridge, supporting applications for stewardship scheme and to advise on supplementary winter feed. We've also started a year-long project across an estate in Worcestershire, looking at the variety of birds that they have throughout a 12-month period, and that's starting to show some really interesting results. We ring across North Shropshire, so we work with a farmer called Richard Tomlinson across there, who is very much into zero till, but also about how he can improve his land for birds. And the work that we've done with farmers is featured across BBC News, BBC Autumn Watch. We've produced films for German TV. We've promoted our work through the British Trust for Ornithology Conference, and we've done lots of demonstrations for the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, and we've helped farmers with the big farmland bird counts and social and other bird surveys. So it's really, really interesting, the work what we're doing. So why are we supporting them? It's very, very easy to criticise farmers, and the figures that you've seen have shown that farming has resulted in a huge decrease. But rather than dwell on the past and criticise what's gone on historically, it's vitally important that environmental groups work with farmers to try and make a difference, because only with education and working together can we start to see a difference, and we can start to improve the figures and reverse that trend. So we're starting to see an increase. If we don't work together, we just don't think that can happen. And in face of constant criticism, some farmers might not feel that it's worth it, and we've got to address that. So we've got to explain to farmers why they are so vitally important. And I come back to the fact that British farmland is in essence our natural nature reserve, our national nature reserve. So this is Andy. Andy's one of our farmers that we've worked with in Pattingham in Staffordshire. Andy is probably at the forefront of farmers who are running a productive farm, but also doing a vast amounts for wildlife. And Andy is hugely supportive in the work that we're doing, but more so he's hugely supportive of wildlife. And he has undertaken very successful schemes across his farm to increase the numbers of birds there. And we have seen an increase across his farm, and some of those figures will come up shortly. But also we've started to find out things about his farm that perhaps were unheard of. The bird he's holding in the right-hand picture is a corn bunting. This is, again, a bird that forms part of the Farmland Bird Index. It's taken a significant decline, and there aren't many of them about. However, over the last few years, we've started to see an increase in corn buntings across Andy's farm. So when we first started there in 2016, we saw and heard the odd bird. And this year there were more than 25 of those birds being seen across the farm. Now there's many reasons for that, but a lot of the work that he is doing with the way he farms and the way he feeds is making a huge difference. And you can see by the smile on his face, if we can get farmers smiling about wildlife and about the work that they do and the importance of birds, we can make a difference together. So there are lots of different things that we can do, and there are lots of different schemes that we look at that make a real difference. And we're going to talk about those now. Some of the key areas for us when we look at it is disturbance. Farmland tends to be private property, so birds are less disturbed by the public. Farmland birds, a lot of whom are ground nesting, are susceptible to disturbance from humans, and that might include farmland machinery. However, where we have footpaths, we're seeing a huge increase in disturbance by dogs off lead during the breeding season. So we can walk across a farm that we've got in Purton in Staffordshire that's crisscrossed by about 14 miles of footpaths. It's a vitally important area for breeding skylarks, but more often than not, we see people who are walking dogs with dogs off the lead who are running across the fields, and these make an impact on ground nesting birds. So despite all of the work that farmers will do to improve it, and there are signs on the screen about having conservation study areas, about no public entry, as the members of the public, we also have to take some responsibility for our actions when we are out in the countryside, and disturbance for farmland species is huge. But I'm now going to talk about a few schemes that really make a difference. So supplementary winter feed is a scheme that's part of a stewardship system that sees farmers provide food during what we call the hungry gap. So this is the period between the end of December up until April, where there's probably not a lot of crops left over. There are very, very little seeds in the field, but the birds need to eat. It's cold, so they need food sources. So supplementary winter feed provides that additional food source for birds throughout these periods. And significantly, this can attract a large variety of birds. So on your screen, you can see lots and lots of different birds. And some of these are key farmland bird index species. So the little yellow birds that you can see with my cursors on there are yellowhammers, there are chaffinch, there's a corn bunting in there, there's a number of linnets, and we start to see these key birds using these feed, and this will become really important for them. So across the farm, we will get flocks between 300 and 2,000 farmland birds coming in purely to use this feed. So it's providing them food and sustenance at a really difficult time. And it's a fantastic system that farmers can do. Whilst farmers can get grants for it, a lot of farmers who aren't in the scheme will still put down screenings from their grain stores, and they will still go out and put food down to give these birds the best chance they have of getting through the winter. So that picture shows sort of some of the birds on it. And this is probably a better picture, which probably most of the farmland bird index species that are critical being shown. The bird that you can see, if my cursor is up, is a corn bunting, again an unusual bird, very scarce, but Andy, and this is Andy's farm, is really, really leading the way in Staffordshire of increasing the numbers of these birds. And you can see lots of different birds. Yellowhammer is one of those birds that we looked at on the farmland birds index of showing a big decline. But I can show you photos at Andy's last winter, where on certain days where we've fed, and we feed perhaps every couple of days, that we will get 200 to 300 yellowhammer down one part of the track, and this is really supporting them, and our numbers are increasing. So I think the totals that we had for 2020 are around 60% more than we had in the years previously. So it is making a difference, because once the birds find the food and they find that the hedgerows are in good quality, there's good cover for them, they tend to stay and they will tend to breed, and the productivity will increase and increase and increase. So you can see from farmland birds, and you can see from the supplementary winter feed, that this scheme is making a huge difference to the birds in our British countryside. And it's something that we would love to see replicated across the UK. So some of these are the birds that we will encounter. If we had an opportunity, I would try and get people to name them, but sort of from top left to right. So top left is a linnet, again, a farmland bird.
You know what your name is? Oh,
hello, sorry. So the bird at the top left is a linnet, so a farmland bird species, increasing in numbers. It loves supplementary winter feed. It feeds on small seeds, and we see them across farmland. The bird next to it is a male chaffinch, the very pink bird. Again, you might see them in your gardens, but this is a farmland bird. Greenfinches, again, these benefit from the seed that we put down. Tree sparrows, fortunately, in some areas of the Trent Valley, we have good numbers of tree sparrows, but this is a bird that's in significant decline. Across the country, a lot of work is being put into sort of sustaining their population, but they don't travel particularly far and are really susceptible to cold winters, and their populations can fluctuate quite significantly. But fortunately, supplementary winter feed, nest box schemes can start to have an impact on those. Corn buntings we've discussed. The bright yellow bird here is a yellow wagtail. These will use farmland fields to breed. A really bright bird, one of my favourites. We see them quite a lot around at this time of the year. Now is the good time to go out into the countryside and see them in farmland fields. And then we've got a yellow hammer and a reed bunting. So a variety of birds that we come across, but these are probably the most iconic ones of small little farmland birds that benefit from the systems that farmers undertake. So these are the kind of statistics that we can keep, and this doesn't provide all our data, but this is the ringing data that we've got across Andy's farm over the last few years. And you can see the most left-hand column was a couple of years ago, and the numbers are either steady or increasing. I can tell you this year that we had over 100 yellowhammers. We've had about 250 linnets. Still no corn buntings, but they're a very canny bird. Bramblings last year, 2 years ago, there weren't many bramblings in the country, but again, we've started to catch them. So all of this data, and we will keep years worth of data, will show how the birds are doing on that particular farm, and that's vitally important for farmers, and it provides them a lot of information on what's doing well, what's not doing so well, and where a bird isn't doing so well or might decline. We can start to give them advice and guidance about what they can do to try and improve that situation. So it's a real sort of circular process that the information that we gather can inform farmers. They can have a look at it, and then again we can inform them about schemes that they can look at to improve it moving forward. So then we're going to talk about covers and margins. So areas of farmlands that are left along hedgerows, in particular areas that farmers put down for a variety of reasons. So some of these would be for wild bird seed mixes, which you can see where the sunflowers are at Andy's farm here on the top left. So that is a whole crop not designed for food or for productivity. It's not harvested. It's purely planted for the benefit of wild birds. So that is a huge area of farmland that is just left for feeding birds at difficult times of the year. Now, if you think a bag of sunflower hearts across the UK or to buy in a shop are very expensive, they might cost you £30 for a sack. There are hundreds of bags of sunflowers across these farmland margins providing food. The cover below, where you can see some poppies and some white flowers, extends onto that picture on the right. Again, that can provide food, but that's more for pollinators and nectar feeders and insects. And again, it provides fantastic habitat for insects and butterflies, but it also provides an excellent food source for birds during the breeding season that can use that area to gather caterpillars and grubs and flies to feed the chicks. So it's a really interesting area. Lots of farms take these farmland margins on. It's a really useful thing for birds, and it plays a monumental impact on what we see in farmland. The picture that you see in the top left with the hay bales behind it and the sunflower strip, that strip was in essence 60 foot wide and about half a mile long. And towards September and October last year, there were flocks of between 1,500 and 2,000 mixed bird farmland birds, linnets, chaffinches using that feed. So a huge, huge benefit for farmland birds. So these are some of the pictures that you can see. These are some of the pictures that we've got of these covers. So you can see these again, Andy's farm. So this is the huge strip of sunflowers, linseed, mustard, fodder radish, they're planted purely for seeds for birds, and these are vast areas. So whilst the field on at the top in that picture to the right was either winter wheat or barley, this is a huge area that the farmer has planted purely for birds, and hopefully will give you an indication of some of the work that they are doing, because they provide a vast amount of food. So for us, these wild bird seed mixes offer a great opportunity for us to catch and survey birds. So we're very selective about how often we go. We don't go all the time. We allow the birds to feed regularly. So we might do sessions once a fortnight, and in some cases once a week, but in different areas of the food in the area. But because it attracts a lot of birds, it gives us a good opportunity to catch them and to ring them and to understand specific populations across those farms. So you can see in the top picture, these are mist nets. These are the methods that we use to safely catch birds. So they're a very fine mesh that the birds fall into. They don't exactly get caught. They fall into pockets within there, so they're safely caught. The mortality rate for ringing, so birds that die during ringing, is less than 0.1%. And we're really careful about bird welfare. So it's vitally important that when we handle these birds, that we show them the utmost of respect. But we can gather a lot of information from them, and these areas that attract birds are really useful. So where you've got the mist net there with birds in there, we check in the nets regularly. So the nets are checked every 10 minutes, but we have constant sight of them, and we can start to see lots of different species. So the bird that you will see in the top right hand corner is a brambling. This is a visitor from Scandinavia that comes into the country in sort of September and October, and is a farmland species. It comes across the UK to feed, and we will often find that bird across supplementary winter feed areas and within wild bird seed mixes. So it attracts lots and lots of different species. And these wild bird seed mixes we would love to see them across all farms, because they offer such fantastic habitat and food. So when we look at the farmland bird covers, these are the kinds of plants that farmers plant, but these are most importantly what the farmland birds like. So some of you will know what quinoa or quinoa is. So these are little seed plants, again, fodder radish, buckwheat and sunflower, all offer birds with a varied diet, lots of different opportunities to feed. So when we advise farmers on what they should be planting, these are the kind of seeds that offer the best opportunities and the best food sources for birds. Of course, they will put wheat or corn down, cereal crops, and they are important. However, the smaller seeds seem to be favoured, and we can offer advice in relation to the kind of mixes that they can plant and the kind of mixes that offer the best for different species, and the kind of mixes of seeds that they can provide in their winter seed crops. So some of the other things that farmers can do and that we would advise on, as well as us catching birds out in the field, we can also look at nest box monitoring schemes. And again, at Andy's, we've got several barn owl boxes out. We've got boxes for tawny owls. We've got boxes for small birds, and we've got boxes for kestrels and little owls. And all of these little schemes, they're not particularly expensive for farmers to do. They're not, it's not price restrictive, and we can get lots of box up, and it gives great habitat for a wide range of species. So the top left-hand box is again at Andy's, and these are young kestrels that have nested on the farm for the last 10 years. All of the detritus and muck in there is obviously waste, but there's a lot of food items with small rodents and birds, and this is really important for the environment to have species like this. And just a small square box on the side of a shed will offer fantastic habitat. The bird to the right is a barn owl, and barn owls love these kind of boxes that you can see. and we will provide farmers boxes and advice on where to do them. And we've got some fantastic volunteers who help us produce boxes, one of whom, Dennis, is in his 90s, and he's producing boxes for us all of the time. And we can get these boxes out into the countryside. And by doing that, we offer fantastic habitat for birds. And this is something that we advise, and something that we're quite passionate about. And we've got many boxes out across farms in the region, from barn owls to little owls to tawny owls to flycatchers, to lots of different species that we're providing habitat to, and farmers are more than helpful to do that. So this is a nest box in a farmyard at Andy's. You can see the farmyards there. You can see it's a working farm, but you can see that we've just got a box on the side of a grain store, and hopefully this video will work. And this is a kestrel. So this is a kestrel that's fledged in that box. It's really wet. You can see in the habitat outside at the moment, it's pouring with rain, but it provides with that bird with some cover. It provides it with some shelter, and it provides it with fantastically safe nesting habitat that doesn't get disturbed. So I'll just play it through once more. And we can put trail cameras up. We can monitor boxes in many different ways. And this is a camera that we had up very close, well, about 6 foot away, a trail cam. And we could look at it and we could monitor those birds. It's fantastic for the farmer. It's great for their social media, that they get quite enthusiastic about sharing it. But most importantly, this nest box in the last 7 years has produced about 60 to 70 new kestrels that have gone out and bred just purely for one little box on the side of a shed. So you can see how important it is. So when we work with farmers, it's really important that we understand the kind of land that they've got, because not all farms are going to be suitable for all species, and not all farmland birds want particular areas. So they will have lots and lots of different requirements. They'll have requirements for breeding. So birds such as skylarks and lapwings nest on the ground. Skylarks will like to nest in a cereal crop or short grass. Lapwings like a wet pasture or pasture land, and again they nest on there. So if you are farming and ploughing potatoes, or you've got lots of woodland, you're not going to identify or attract those kind of species. But at the same time, areas of woodland within farms can offer a different variety of habitat for a wide range of species. This area in the bottom right with this wet meadows is just outside Nicola's area of the Trent Meadows, but this is just on the upper Trent. The Trent runs to the right, and this is a floodplain, and this is home to fantastic numbers of lapwing. Now that soil and that land there would be really rich habitat. However, it's left purely for floodplains because they're really important. But and as well as that, it holds a huge amounts of populations of wading birds, lots of different passerines, and it's just purely left for the species out there. So where farmers have got land such as this, we can provide advice in relation to what is going to work best for them. You can see how close that the arable land is, where my cursor is, and I don't know if you can see that, but it sort of the cursor upon his wheat fields, but all after that is fantastic habitat for a wide range of birds with lots and lots of breeding lapwings. And for some of you, if you can just about make out on this picture, there are 4 lapwing chicks in this picture. They're fantastically camouflaged little birds, really difficult to see. We use thermal technology to find them. But sadly, this is a bird that is heavily predated in the UK, and is one that is suffering significantly from predation and disturbance and loss of habitat. But again, there are still areas within the region that farmers are leaving quiet areas just for this kind of species. So when we talk to farmers, we try and understand their land. We like to visit their farms, and we like to understand what farmers have got in their land, because it's really important that if they want to encourage and support birds, that they're encouraging and supporting the right birds, because some birds might be easily attracted. You can attract some birds through winter bird feeds, wild bird seed covers, or supplementary winter feed. But if you haven't got some species on your farm, the likelihood of attracting them can be quite difficult. So tree sparrows and corn buntings, if you haven't got them close by within 6 or 7 kilometres, it's pointless for a farmer to put up a huge nest box system or feeding specifically for that species, because it's not going to attract them. So what we try to do is advise farmers by looking at their land, looking what they've got, what are the best schemes, what are the best options for those for their farms. And by doing that, we can understand if there are any stewardship schemes that's going to benefit them, and look at what is best for that farms. Some schemes don't impact, some environmental schemes will have a negative impact on species. So for example, if I'll come to it on the next slide, a lot of if farmers go down the road of forestry or agricultural forestry, or planting lots of trees, that can have a detrimental impact on birds such as skylarks. Skylarks like large fields. They don't like areas where there are trees or something where predators can roost in or hunt from, hedgerows. So when we go out catching skylarks, they tend to be a specific distance away from hedge lines. So they like lots and lots of open space, and they are away from hedgerows where predators might hunt or mammals might hunt. So when you start to plant trees, you can have a negative impact on those birds, because they don't like areas where there's lots of tall hedges or trees where a bird of prey might roost. Again, lapwings, we talked about, they love wet ground. They love wet pasture, river meadows. So by farmers making improvements to drainage and making that soil drier, that can have a detrimental impact on the numbers of birds and breeding success. So again, it's giving farmers some advice around, if they've got fields that aren't particularly good for growing crops because they're wet, then we can talk to them about the kind of work and schemes that they can do to increase it. And then woodcock. Woodcock is a bird that we'll talk about. They love to roost in woodland, so they need a woodland habitat. They need somewhere in the daytime where they can hide and roost and disappear into. But at night, we know that woodcock feed on arable land, so land that's left or used for growing of crops or for pasture. So it's fantastically important that a bird like a woodcock has a little bit of everything. It needs some woodland to hide in, but it needs arable land to feed in. And we can provide sort of guidance in relation to that. So if a farm's got lots of woodcock, but they want to remove copse of trees to increase how much wheat they can grow, we can give advice and say, well, actually, that's a really useful piece of land. And a lot of farmers are listening. So when we look at what we do, we try and explain to people the benefits of promoting what they're doing. So these are some of the tweets, and we've got a huge social media following at the moment, and we like to promote the work that we're doing. So some of the work that we will see is all about promotion of farming. So Matt Pryor is a ringer from in Wiltshire, and he does a huge amount of works with tree sparrows, but we like to promote it. And by promoting it, we get other people in the region involved, and other farmers encouraged to get involved with it. Richard and Alan are both farmers, and you can see that the work that they're doing, they're extremely proud of their farms, but more so they're doing so much, and they're proud of the birds that they've got. So again, Alan's planted a huge crop there of sunflower seeds, and Richard's got fantastic farmland across Shropshire that hosts a vast amount of species. So when he's out in his tractor or he's out and about, he's photographing the birds that he's got because he's really proud to see them. And this is what we're trying to encourage, because the more that farmers talk about it and the more that we can engage in them, we can educate and we can plan and we can do far more with it. So it's fantastic to see that the work that they're doing. So for farmers, there needs to be lots of trust between farmers and ringers. They let us onto their land, and they don't want huge amounts of negativity from us, and we don't ever seek to do that. We go out there, we're telling them that we're supportive, we're trying to tell them that the work that they're doing is having a massive impact. We can give them some fantastic data from the work that we undertake. We can advise them on lots of different areas, from identifying birds to what they can do to improve habitat, to the surveys that they can undertake. It gets a huge network of farmers out there who are willing to help. Like I said, we're overwhelmed by the amount of farmers that contact us who are desperate to get into farmland stewardship schemes, who are hugely enthusiastic about working with farmland birds. So there's lots and lots of people out there that are interested, and we're able to provide their details nationally and internationally to other ringing groups who could help. We love to get a positive social media message out, because the more positivity that we get about farmers will change people's attitudes, and it's about that partnership approach. And we provide lots and different reports. We can provide them with baseline data that they can use for applications for stewardship schemes. And our surveys are long term. We've got years worth of data throughout our time as ringers of ringing data for farmland birds. So rather than us doing 1 or 2 visits a year, or surveys being done once or twice a year, we can provide quite a lot of data throughout the year. Now, moving on to some of the other work that we're doing. This isn't particularly a farmland bird, but the work that we do with farmland technology, with thermal technology, is really, really important. So I'm just going to quickly shoot through some of the work that we're doing and just give you an idea of what thermal technology is. So this video here is a thermal image of a bird called a nightjar. And if I just pause it when it comes to a specific point, not probably there, you can start to see that the intense white on that bird is the hottest area. And from taking images such as this, we can learn a lot about birds, because this is taken in total darkness. So at night time, people aren't out bird watching, people aren't out surveying because it's limited. But with thermal technology, we can open up a different aspect on what we're seeing at night time across farmland. So our findings have started to show lots and lots of different things about farmland at night. So the little picture that you can see at the bottom is a flock of skylarks. These are roosting at night time, and you can see that they're all sitting there. Now, they wouldn't be covered in surveys because you couldn't see them. And through the work that we've done, we're starting to see large numbers of skylarks across arable fields across the region. So in this picture, this video, you can start to see what a roosting flock of skylarks would look like. So again, this is in total darkness. If you walked across there, you wouldn't see anything. But in essence, when we look at it, there are vast amounts of skylarks across these areas. And quite interestingly, you'll see there's no hedgerows or trees anywhere near it, and skylarks roost communally. So if one bird is spooked by a predator, it will lift, and everyone else will lift within that group. So that's their defense mechanism moving forward. So our work with skylark has shown lots and lots of interesting data. Because we were pioneers of this and we've started to look at it, our totals have shown, through the use of thermal technology, our catches of skylarks have increased. So you can see, just from a small group in 2016, We caught 26% of the national total of skylarks caught across UK and Ireland. In 2017, we caught 72% of the national total of free-flying skylarks. And again, that figure is repeated. In 2020, I just checked the figures, and we caught 457 skylarks. So this data is really important at showing the kind of work that we're doing, and the surveys that we're doing is informing science and helping us get a better understanding in populations. So the chart on the left will show you the totals of free flying skylarks crossed in the UK, ringed in the UK from 2002. And you can see those numbers are quite small up until we get to 2016, where that numbers are increasing. And our work is shared now across various ringing groups, and those numbers will continue to increase to give us a far better picture of what is out there. So I'm going to move on quickly. And again, thermal work. These birds are called golden plover. This is a farmland that's located 4 miles outside of Wolverhampton. And the presence of these birds was not known until we've been out surveying at night time. So this is an upland species that moves down into wetlands and meadows and goes onto sort of coastal areas. But during the winter, these birds come in and they love arable fields. So this farm was zero till, so it's not ploughed, and it presents lots of food habitat for these birds. So unless we were doing the work that we were doing and being allowed access, the presence of these birds would probably not be picked up on bird surveys in different parts of the year. But because of the work that we're doing, the thermal technology, we're able to inform farm of what's about. Again, these are golden plover. Again, a farm just outside Staffordshire, and the white area here is a badger. And you can see the badger going across the field into the flock of golden plover. Sadly, and it is nature, we've seen badgers take a lot of ground roosting birds. We've seen them disturbed and take nesting skylarks. But again, the birds aren't particularly too disturbed with this. But this is the kind of information that our work with thermal imaging is showing. So again, you start to see a whole new world in the dark of what is going on with nature. And again, the kind of behavior that we're seeing, the kind of birds that we're seeing, all helps inform science and data. And again, very, very quickly, because I appreciate it's 8 o'clock, this is us what we do when we're catching birds at night time. So the little white splodge you can see is a woodcock, and we've got a thermal camera, a small torch and a hand net. And with this, we can simply walk up to the bird and we can put a net over it and we can safely catch it. So this is something that thermal technology has allowed us to do. We've started to find woodcock across the region. We found woodcock within a mile of Walsall town centre, and woodcock are a really interesting bird. I'll show you some of the pictures. This is what they look at in the daytime, and through ringing data, this is the kind of information we've gathered. Sadly, both these birds were shot. One of the birds that we caught in 2018 had travelled to eastern Russia, a distance of nearly 2,500 kilometres, where it had gone out to, we catch them in the winter, and it had probably gone out there to breed. And another one we caught in Penkridge, again, a movement of it, sadly it was shot, but we can inform the strategies and the numbers of birds we're seeing. What we have found across our farms, that if we have work on farms that are no shoots, none of the farms that we work on, and despite them being big areas, none of them allow woodcock to be shot now on the land. One of the farms has completely given up any kind of shooting on their ground for pheasants and partridges and game. So it's really great that we've been able to get that message out, and that the positive work that we're doing with farmland birds has helped protect them through lots of different ways. But ringing data gets us lots of information about what birds are doing. As we move on now, we've just purchased a thermal drone. and we're going to start to use a thermal drone to monitor nests. So this is a thermal drone. The areas of orange are the most intense areas of heat. The purple's cooler. And this is an area, not farmland, but this is an area that we're getting into that we're going to monitor skylarks and ground nesting birds for with thermal technology. So very quickly, you can see this is a bird called a nightjar. And with the thermal drone, we can see that bird and its nest site. So thermal technology in the future, we will be able to go out, survey areas of farmland, give farmers an indication of where they might have a lapwing nest or skylark. We can import our GPS data to their tractors so they can avoid it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, and watch this space, our work with thermal drone technology is going to be really interesting moving forward. So very, very quickly, we will get farmers into doing bird surveys, and this is something that you can all take part in. Every year there's a big farm and bird count, and you don't have to be a farmer to be involved in it. And there's lots of details that you can find out about how you can get involved in these. There's lots of different BTO surveys that are available. And if any of you've got a smartphone, there is an app on there called Bird Track. And that's a really simple system for you to go out, record the birds that you see on your phone, and you can submit that data to a national scheme, and it all provides useful data moving forward. So there's lots of things out there that you can do for bird surveys. So we're just going to stop there now. That's all our contact details. We're always willing to talk to volunteers or people who are interested in getting involved in ringing. We're also really interested in other farmers who are interested in the work that we do. So there's lots of opportunities to contact us. And I think at that point, I'm going to stop sharing. I think we're going to have a quick 5 minutes break. I'll hand back to Nicola, and then we'll have a Q&A session.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, thank you so much, Paul, for that. It's really, really interesting to listen to. And I'd heard some of it on the thermal imaging talk you did before, but it's just really great to hear the positive stories that you've created with farmers in the area. Thank you so much. So yeah, we'll have 4 or 5 minute break now then, just to stretch your legs. I'm going to go and grab a little bit more water, and then we'll come to the Q&A and discussion session. So if you have any questions and you want to pop them in the chat while we're having the break, then please feel free to do that. Otherwise, you'll be able to ask them afterwards just by unmuting. Okay, so we'll come back in 5 minutes time then. Thanks, everyone. Right then, hopefully people are still there and haven't all disappeared off. So we'll come back and we'll start with some of the questions. I can see a couple have been popped into the chat, so we'll start with those ones. Sorry, my emails are talking to me.
I think Tony's still away, I think. Well,
no worries, we'll wait for Tony to come back as it's his question then. Give him another 30 seconds or so. There he is. I can see Tony now then, so I'll start with Tony's question. And he's interested to know whether Andy's farm is subjected to organised shooting of game birds.
Tony, no, it's not. It's not. There's no pheasant shoots. It's close to other shoots, but he doesn't have driven game on there. There is shooting on there. He has predator control. He's got a hell of a lot of corvids very, very close to him, but there's no organised shooting. And the other farm that we were talking about, this is one called the Bradshaws. That was a huge shooting estate. Quite intensive shooting as well with red-legged partridge, but as a result of us working on there, they stopped for the first year shooting any type of woodcock or snipe, and the year after that she completely stopped shooting on the estate. So there is no driven shooting on there. There's odd rough shooting, which is part of it, but there is no driven shooting. So hopefully that informs, I think our legacy from that farm will be we stopped woodcock getting shot on those farms, which I get why people do it. I don't agree with it, but I understand people do it. But I think one of the legacies for us is across those areas, the big estates that we work on, and one of them in Overbreeze, it's still a shooting estate. There is no shooting of any woodcock or wading bird on there. So it's having a really good impact. Does that help answer it?
Yeah, thanks. From your experience, do you see any negative impact of pheasant, red-legged partridge in relation to habitat or, you know, sort of competition for food, etc.?
That's a really brilliant question, to be fair, because I can tell you one of the farms I go on, everywhere you turn there's a red-legged partridge. I don't know if the increase in species such as that makes a difference to an increase in predators, because I don't mean to be derogatory to partridges, they're not the brightest birds, they just tend to sit there. So I don't know if the increased numbers of game birds would increase the number of predators. There's quite a lot of them about, but it's not limited to the ones where we've got driven birds. So at Andy's, there's no pheasants put down on Andy's, but there's still a lot of pheasants on there. But I couldn't give you a proper comprehensive answer as to is it a negative impact. I mean, some of the woodlands that we've gone in where there are pheasant shoots are managed really, really well for wild birds as well. So there's lots of proper, good, dense quality woodlands that are, you know, home to things like nightjars and nightingales. But it's a really good question, and one that I probably couldn't answer sufficiently, less Martin or Ben could.
Well, I was just going to say, we're finding wild grey partridge on a number of sites, and they also have red-legged. So I think with the increase in cover for the red-legs that they put down, we might see that grey partridge also benefit from that.
And Tony, and just for your info, across a lot of the farms we've got, they wouldn't have known. We're finding a lot of grey partridge. Ben's got a farm that's just outside Walsall that's got good numbers of grey partridge, and we've got them at Andy's in good numbers. They're not, I wouldn't say they're doing well, but we are finding proper grey partridge around in the countryside now, purely through thermal.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So the next question in the chat is from David. Do any of the farmers see increased bird numbers on their land as an opportunity for wildlife tourism, or are they just happy to get some positive feedback? I imagine they can end up with some costs even with grants. Yeah.
Again, David, brilliant. It is a double-edged sword, and I'll give you an opportunity. I'll sort of give you an example of why some do and why some don't. I would suggest someone like Andy would be quite positive towards it. But one of the issues with, say, winter supplementary feeding, if I took you to that, if we had lots of people go into that area, what's going to happen with the birds? Is it going to displace them? But I think there are opportunities for farmers to look at sort of what bird hides if they've got particular areas and areas that they could look at wildlife tourism. The difficulty comes with it is irresponsible members of the public. So about 6 weeks ago, we caught a little bunting in Worcestershire, quite an unusual bird. I think there's 240 ever been ringed in the UK, mostly at coastal bird observatories and up in the far north. And we put that out. It was caught on Farmland. It was caught as a result of supplementary winter feeding. And we put that out. We put it onto Twitter. The estate retweeted it. And the following Tuesday, I think that was on a Sunday, the tweet went out. On the following Tuesday, they had 2 birders trespassing miles off footpaths straight onto that farm. So the argument is perhaps because it's farmland, it increases birds, but I think there are some opportunities for wildlife tourism. In relation to Andy, it costs him a lot of money. In relation to Jake and some of the other farmers, Richard Tomlinson we work with, they do get grants, but I'm sure it doesn't fully cover their cost and certainly doesn't cover the cost of the lost land that they could have farmed. I've spoke to Andy lots about growing sunflowers as a wild birdseed crop to farm, but at the moment he's just more than happy to have half a mile of sunflowers up and down his farms to attract the birds. But I think there's definitely opportunities for farmers to think about it. It's getting that balance between them having to manage something else on the farm, if that makes sense. So manage people on sort of private land. But it's something I could probably speak to Andy about. It'd be really interesting to hear his views.
I think with what you were saying, Hoppy, as well, is what we've seen during lockdown is farmers are quite happy for people to come and have a look at what they do. But people are walking their dogs, letting them off the leads through the crop, and also creating footpaths straight through their crops, which is costing them a lot of money. So I think if the farmers probably would be happy to share this opportunity more and experience, but I think people need to start respecting people, the farmers' land really as well.
I mean, David, what else is really interesting? That one of the estates that we've got in Worcestershire has fairly regular records of dotterel, and they go up onto the top of the hill and they go into pea fields, and you'll get responsible birders who will go up there and stand on the field edge and take photographs, and then you'll get irresponsible birders who jump over the wall and cause hundreds of pounds of damage to the crops. So there's this real, we're trying to meet in the middle to get sort of working together with farmers. But like Ben says, there are those extremes. There are the farmers that just don't want people on their land, for whatever reasons, or they don't want them on there. And then there's the other side, the birders or photographers or members of the public who are just running roughshod through farmlands. I mean, Overbury Estate's got 27 miles of footpaths through its estate. And during lockdown, the amount of damage that it's caused to crops because people haven't liked walking on muddy paths, so they've just walked into the crops. So there's a real interesting balance to strike. And then if you've got a shoot on it, not like Andy's has, but some of the others, gamekeepers don't want people on the land for all sorts of reasons, be it nefarious or genuine. So it's a difficult one.
Such an interesting point, isn't it? That balance between welcoming people and keeping the land for what they want to use it for. Yeah.
I could guarantee that if we could guarantee that people would act responsibly and we put a bird hide on Andy's supplementary winter feed site, I think Andy would be quite sort of keen to do that. The difficulty is it just takes a few for him to turn it, to change it really. So, because somebody always wants to get a little bit closer.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. Next question then from Valerie. What impact is there where farmers have brooks and rivers on their land where they've straightened and cleared banks?
Not very good, Valerie. Pretty, you know, it's not really good straightening rivers, and I'm not saying that as an ornithologist or a bird ringer. I'm just saying that as somebody who likes water courses and likes to see beautiful trout streams and bends in rivers and stuff like that. So of course it will have a detrimental impact. Of course it needs to be looked at. But what is really interesting with what we're seeing with zero till, you don't get as much runoff or silt going into water courses because the soil's left undisturbed. So when we go into some of the farms, you can see you've got muddy, silty rivers going in, and probably Nicola will be far better at explaining this, but where you've got minimal disturbance to the soil, the runoff that they get is completely different. You get clear streams, and we've got streams and springs through Andes. None of them have been straightened. You can see on his fields they're all windy as they should be. So I'm sure it will have a huge impact. And like I've said earlier in the presentation, improved drainage, which is what a lot of that straightening channels does, can change habitats. And, you know, straightening out and improving drainage on arable fields might have a detrimental impact on birds like lapwings. So I'm sure it does. But there is a seed change, Valerie. People are starting to think more about the environment than they have in the past. I am not naive enough to think that all farmers are brilliant. And whilst I'm a big supporter of lots of farmers, there's still a lot of work to do. But by working together, I'm sure we can drive that change quicker and we can make a better difference for generations to come.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much, Paul. There's no more questions in the chat, so I'm just going to take this quick opportunity to point out I popped a link in the chat box just above David and Valerie's questions, and that just links you to a quick feedback form. So if you wanted to fill that out this evening, then please feel free, but I will also send a follow-up email to everybody tomorrow with that link. And those feedback forms have been really helpful for us in improving and changing these Trent talks and making them the best they can be. So if you do fancy filling that in, that's really, really appreciated. Did Paul and Ben and Martin, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I think you wanted to mention a couple of other things before we finished, didn't you?
Yeah, I was just, I mean, one of the ways what we're trying to raise some funds to help us with some of these projects, we've just tried to look at different ways we can engage and actually gather some funds. And what we've done recently is designed our first ever pin badge. I know Shanice, that's on here at the moment, has recently purchased one. But I was just wondering if anyone wants to look at those and buy a pin badge from us, which money goes towards all of our projects. If they visit our website at West Midlands Ringing Group.co.uk, you can purchase it through the shop there. They are quite nice badges as well, which we're pleased about. But other than that, unless anyone else has got any other questions, we're happy. Done.
Yeah. if anybody else wants to unmute and ask questions, then please feel free. This is your opportunity. Yep, Tony.
Just very quickly, have you seen any nightjar yet this year?
No.
Tony, in about 20 minutes, I could let you know because I'm just going out to have a look.
I'll text you, Tony.
I'm just going to go have a look in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there was one reported in Dorset yesterday, I believe.
I've got a wooden one here that I've just been mending.
That's not a good look, mate.
Yeah, that's what they look like, but I've just mended it tonight.
Too many spots on the wing.
No, it's only got 3. It's all right.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you.
But has anyone else got any questions? I just want to say thanks for everyone again logging on. Our last talk with yourselves, Nicola, has reached over 1,000 views on the thermal technology. It was always going to be an interesting subject for people, and hopefully in the next winter we can put a talk on for you around the thermal drone stuff as well.
Absolutely, yeah, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you so much then for everybody to coming in and listening this evening, and thank you to Paul and Ben and Martin from West Midlands Ringing Group for giving us their time this evening. And
just one more thing. When COVID allows, we will be doing some demonstrations in the future, and we hope to get some sort of farmland bird demonstrations towards the end of the year, so people can come out and not so much wildlife tourism, but they can come out and see what we do and get to see some of the birds. So hopefully, if you keep looking at our social media when we can and when it's safe to do so, we'll get back out and we'll allow people to come and have a look at what we do.
Fantastic. We'll see if we can support you with that as well. Brilliant. So finally, thanks to Tash and Adam for providing the interpretation for sign language as well. And yes, thank you very much everyone for joining us this evening. We'll finish up and let you go and have dinner.
Have a good night.
Very good.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
We enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Val.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.